Welcome to our channel. Today we are going to see historical most dangerous serial killer Jack Ripper. This video is about the serial killer. For other uses, see Jack the Ripper for the murders in or near Whitechapel between 1888 and 1891. See Whitechapel murders. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in and around the impoverished Whitechapel district of London, England, in 1888. In both criminal case files and the contemporaneous journalistic accounts, the killer was also called the Whitechapel Murderer and Leather Apron. Attacks ascribed to Jack the Ripper typically involved women working as prostitutes who lived and worked in the slums of the East End of London. Their throats were cut prior to abdominal mutilations. The removal of internal organs from at least 3 of the victims led to speculation that their killer had some anatomical or surgical knowledge. Rumors that the murders were connected intensified in September and October 1888, and numerous letters were received by media outlets and Scotland Yard from individuals purporting to be the murderer. The name Jack the Ripper originated in this Dear Boss letter written by an individual claiming to be the murderer, which was disseminated in the press. The letter is widely believed to have been a hoax and may have been written by journalists to heighten interest in the story and increase their newspaper's circulation. The From Hell letter received by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee came with half of a preserved human kidney, purportedly taken from one of the victims. The public came increasingly to believe in the existence of a single serial killer known as Jack the Ripper, mainly because of both the extraordinarily brutal nature of the murders and media coverage of the crimes. Extensive newspaper coverage bestowed widespread and enduring international notoriety on the Ripper, and the legend solidified. A police investigation into a series of 11 brutal murders committed in Whitechapel and Spitalfields between 1888 and 1891 was unable to connect all the killings conclusively to the murders of 1888. 5 victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, are known as the Canonical Five, and their murders between the 31st of August and the 9th of November, 1888 are often considered the most likely to be linked. The murders were never solved, and the legend surrounding these crimes became a combination of historical research, folklore, and pseudo-history, capturing public imagination to the present day. In the mid-19th century, England experienced an influx of Irish immigrants who swelled the populations of the major cities, including the East End of London. From 1882, Jewish refugees fleeing pogroms in the Russian Empire and other areas of Eastern Europe emigrated into the same area. The parish of Whitechapel in the East End became increasingly overcrowded, with the population increasing to approximately 80,000 inhabitants by 1888. Work and housing conditions worsened, and a significant economic underclass developed. 55% of children born in the East End died before they were 5 years old. Robbery, violence, and alcohol dependency were commonplace, and the endemic poverty drove many women to prostitution to survive on a daily basis. In October 1888, London's Metropolitan Police Service estimated that there were 62 brothels and 1,200 women working as prostitutes in Whitechapel, with approximately 8,500 people residing in the 233 common lodging houses within Whitechapel every night, with the nightly price for a coffin bed being 4p and the cost of sleeping upon a linter, or hangover, rope stretched across the dormitory being 2p per person. The economic problems in Whitechapel were accompanied by a steady rise in social tensions. Between 1886 and 1889, frequent demonstrations led to police intervention and public unrest, such as Bloody Sunday, 1887. Anti-Semitism, crime, nativism, racism, social disturbance, and severe deprivation influenced public perceptions that Whitechapel was a notorious den of immorality. Such perceptions were strengthened in 1888, when the series of vicious and grotesque murders attributed to Jack the Ripper received unprecedented coverage in the media. Murders of Jack the Ripper. The large number of attacks against women in the East End during this time adds uncertainty to how many victims were murdered by the same individual. 11 separate murders, stretching from the 3rd of April, 1888 to the 13th of February, 1891, were included in a Metropolitan Police investigation and were known collectively in the police docket as the Whitechapel murders. Opinions vary as to whether these murders should be linked to the same culprit, but 5 of the 11 Whitechapel murders, known as the Canonical Five, are widely believed to be the work of the Ripper. Most experts point to deep slash wounds to the throat, followed by extensive abdominal and genital area mutilation, the removal of internal organs, and progressive facial mutilations as the distinctive features of the Ripper's modus operandi. The first 2 cases in the Whitechapel murders file, those of Emma Elizabeth Smith and Martha Tabram, are not included in the Canonical Five. Smith was robbed and sexually assaulted in Osborne Street, Whitechapel, at approximately 1:30 a.m. on the 3rd of April, 1888. She had been bludgeoned about the face and received a cut to her ear. A blunt object was also inserted into her vagina, rupturing her peritoneum. She developed peritonitis and died the following day at London Hospital. Smith stated that she had been attacked by 2 or 3 men, one of whom she described as a teenager. This attack was linked to the later murders by the press, but most authors attribute Smith's murder to general East End gang violence unrelated to the Ripper case. And Tabram was murdered on a staircase landing in George Yard, Whitechapel, on the 7th of August, 1888. She had suffered 39 stab wounds to her throat, lungs, heart, liver, spleen, stomach, and abdomen, with additional knife wounds inflicted to her breasts and vagina. All but one of Tabram's wounds had been inflicted with a bladed instrument such as a penknife, and with one possible exception, all the wounds had been inflicted by a right-hand individual. Tabram had not been raped. The savagery of the Tabram murder, the lack of an obvious motive, and the closeness of the location and date to the later canonical Ripper murders led police to link this murder to those later committed by Jack the Ripper. However, this murder differs from the later canonical murders because although Tabram had been repeatedly stabbed, she had not suffered any slash wounds to her throat or abdomen. Many experts do not connect Tabram's murder with the later murders because of this difference in the wound pattern. Mary Jane Kelly is generally considered to be the Ripper's final victim, and it is assumed that the crimes ended because of the culprit's death, imprisonment, institutionalization, or emigration. The Whitechapel murders file details another 4 murders that occurred after the Canonical Five, those of Rose Mylett, Alice Mackenzie, the Pinchin Street Torso, and Francis Coles. The strangled body of 26-year-old Rose Mylett, 83, was found in Clark's Yard, High Street, Poplar on the 20th of December, 1888. There was no sign of a struggle, and the police believed that she had either accidentally hanged herself with her collar while in a drunken stupor or committed suicide. However, faint markings left by a cord on one side of her neck suggested Mylett had been strangled. At the inquest into Mylett's death, the jury returned a verdict of murder. Investigation of Frederick Aberline. The vast majority of the City of London police files relating to their investigation into the Whitechapel murders were destroyed in the Blitz. The surviving Metropolitan Police files allow a detailed view of investigative procedures in the Victorian era. A large team of policemen conducted house-to-house inquiries throughout Whitechapel. Forensic material was collected and examined. Suspects were identified, traced, and either examined more closely or eliminated from the inquiry. Modern police work follows the same pattern. More than 2,000 people were interviewed, upwards of 300 people were investigated, and 80 people were detained. Following the murders of Stride and Eddowes, the Commissioner of the City Police, Sir James Fraser, offered a reward of £500 for the arrest of the Ripper. The investigation into the Whitechapel murders was led by the Metropolitan Police's Whitechapel Division CID, headed by Detective Inspector Edmund Reed. After Mary and Nichols' murder, additional detectives, including Frederick Aberline, were brought in from Scotland Yard. The City of London Police, led by Detective Inspector James McWilliam, joined after Catherine Eddowes' murder within the City of London. The investigation was complicated by the absence of Assistant Commissioner Robert Anderson, who was on leave during the critical period. Chief Inspector Donald Swanson was appointed to coordinate the inquiry. Butchers, slaughterers, surgeons, and physicians were initially suspected due to the nature of the mutilations, but investigations cleared local butchers and slaughterers. The possibility of the murderer being a cattle boat crewman was also explored but ruled out due to inconsistent timelines. Police suspected Jack was killer. Jack the Ripper is believed to have been a local resident with regular employment due to the concentration of murders around weekends and holidays. Some theories suggest he was an upper-class, educated man, possibly a doctor or aristocrat, reflecting cultural fears and societal mistrusts. The term Ripperology emerged to describe the study of the case, leading to numerous fictional works. Over the years, many suspects have been proposed, including famous figures like Prince Albert Victor and author Lewis Carroll, though most are based on circumstantial evidence. Despite over 100 named suspects, the Ripper's true identity remains unknown. Legacy of Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper's murders highlighted the poor living conditions in East London slums, leading to public outcry and eventual slum clearances. The Ripper's legend persists, with guided tours and sites like the 10 Bells pub attracting interest. Initially depicted as a monstrous bogeyman, by the 1960s, the Ripper symbolized predatory aristocracy, often portrayed in top hats, merging with horror icons like Dracula. The case inspired numerous fictional and factual works, creating the term Ripperology. Jack the Ripper was named the worst Briton in a 2006 poll. The 2015 opening of the Jack the Ripper Museum and a 2021 fish and chip shop named Jack the Chipper faced public protests.